If you liked Red Dead Redemption 2, there are a few westerns you just have to watch. Great westerns with interesting similarities to both Red Dead games, and some similarities so close that they were surely influences on Dan Houser and the writing staff at Rockstar. But before I get to those movie influences, just a quick note on my history with video games and movies and my kind of ranking of the two as art forms. Well, I say a quick note, but I tend to blather. So if you don't care much about my history with video games and the idea of video games as art, and you just want to hear the list of recommended westerns, if you like Red Dead 2, jump to about 3 minutes 40 seconds. I've always liked video games, but I've always loved movies. For most of my life, I considered video games entertaining, challenging, fun. I did disagree with Roger Ebert's old claim that video games can never be art. They obviously can, and this should have been clear even back in 2010 when he made that argument. But when it came down to it, I shared some of his feelings in that, I definitely had always placed games at least one rung down the ladder from movies in terms of cultural significance and artistic value. These days, though, I feel games and movies shouldn't be separated like this. They should be considered in the same class of entertainment and art, equally worthy of serious consideration. With examples like The Last of Us and the Uncharted series, games have proven that they can be as atmospheric and as cinematic as cinema, as movies. With games like Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, and Firewatch, it's become clear that they can be as narratively compelling as novels, even. As many novels, anyway. Games like Journey, Limbo, and, say, Zelda The Wind Waker demonstrate that they can be as visually interesting as a lot of fine art. Also with games like BioShock and the Stanley Parable, we see that they can also be philosophically, historically, and politically interesting. But the first game that really had me feeling immersed and then emotional at the end, in the way that only the best movies had done for me before, was Red Dead Redemption in 2010. I also happen to have just, maybe this is the reason, I happen to have just gone through a phase of watching a bunch of westerns, and for the first time in my life really getting into good westerns, just before Red Dead Redemption 1 came out. In my experience, from that experience, I think there are a lot of pretty average, dated westerns out there, but there are a few really great ones. And a few that I'm pretty sure Dan Houser and the other Red Dead Redemption writers were influenced by. There are scenes in both games pretty reminiscent of famous scenes from old westerns like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, The Searchers. Some of the Woody Jackson music comes pretty close to Charles Bronson's harmonica theme, say, from Once Upon a Time in the West. Some of the tone, character dynamics, and visuals reminds a lot of some of the cinematography, say, in The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, a more recent western. In particular, there's a train robbery scene that's just beautiful in The Assassination of Jesse James, where the light comes through the trees as our gang of outlaws rob this train, that is just so similar to some of the imagery we get in Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, I'm sure there are many more great westerns. I'm not an expert on the western genre. I haven't seen that many, but these are my favourites and the ones that Red Dead Redemption 2 in particular made me want to go back and rewatch. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, a movie about a pair of gentleman outlaws playing poker, robbing trains, and jumping from cliffs. This movie is great fun and has a lot of specific scenes that connect, I think, to Red Dead Redemption 2.
All right. I'll jump first.
Nope.
Then you jump first.
No, I said.
What's the matter with you?
I can't swim!
You must be nervous, being this close to the water.
Why, are you crazy? The fall will probably kill you.
big boy! Oh, I got you!
The Dollars trilogy, A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Clint Eastwood stars as the man with no name in these slow burn, fantastic spaghetti westerns. Spaghetti westerns just means that they're Italian productions, even though a lot of them have, as I say, American leads. The other, one connection I think it has to Rockstar and to Red Dead in particular is that these Sergio Leone films were known for many scenes being crafted to match the music. Ennio Morricone's music often came first, apparently, and like an opera, Leone then directed the scenes, the pacing and the action of the scene to match the music. This was unusual for films and still is unusual. Leone was unique in his prioritization of music in his films. And as I say, this connects to Rockstar, who are now known for the same prioritization. GTA, Max Payne 3, and Red Dead Redemption, the first game, all have great cinematic moments made kind of magical by the way the music is highlighted, and the action becomes almost secondary to the mood that the track creates, that the music creates. And in fact, Red Dead Redemption 2 has even more of these music-centric scenes than Red Dead Redemption 1 did. Now these three movies, like Red Dead Redemption, are slow, long, moody, and fantastic. If you don't have the patience for all three, which I can understand, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is by far the best, in my opinion.
You'll pay all right. You'll be strung up.
Another little connection is the Rhodes plotline in Red Dead Redemption 2, in which Arthur and the gang try to befriend two rival fighting families in order to play them off against one another and sneak in for profits. Is very similar to the central plot in A Fistful of Dollars, in which Clint plays two gangs off against one another in much the same way Arthur and Dutch do here. Now, there are many good movies with stories similar to Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2, but the most obvious one I think is Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, which tells the story of a retired outlaw trying to live the life of a farmer until he is dragged back to the outlaw's world of violence. Very similar premise to that of Red Dead Redemption 1. Shane is another good western telling the story of a man seemingly trying to get out of his past violent life but being dragged back to protect those he loves. The Wild Bunch is closest in terms of setting, early 20th century industrialization signalling the end of the outlaw era is what The Wild Bunch is kind of about. And in terms of Red Dead Redemption 1 in particular, this story of a man being asked by the government to hunt down his old gang members is common to both. One more, much more recent western I was reminded of in the opening scenes in particular of Red Dead Redemption 2, trudging through the snow to a small isolated cabin where our gang are kind of snowed in, reminded me a lot of Quentin Tarantino's latest movie, The Hateful Eight. And the other thing it has in common with a lot of these other great westerns is the music. The Italian composer Ennio Morricone, who did those Sergio Leone films, scored The Hateful Eight. It's the first score he'd done for a western in 34 years, and the first score he'd done for any film in 13 years. So if you loved Red Dead Redemption 2, as I did, do yourself a favour and go and see some of these movies. They'll remind you of Red Dead, they'll remind you of what was great about Red Dead, and they'll inform some of the I suspect, influences of the two Red Dead games. Enjoy!